Hello again, fellow Earthlings. Due to circumstances beyond my belief, I worked for about 3 days on material that I was going to share today. But I also had some things to do to bring from my apartment to the car, and my arms were full, and I left my portfolio at home. So I'm going to try to touch on the subjects, but next week it will be more explicit and specific because some of my comments come from a book by Sylvia Brown, Secret Societies and How They Affect Each and Every One of Us. But first, I want to thank all those men and women in whatever capacity they hold regarding clearing the snow, being crossing guards for the children at school, the school bus drivers that really have a tough time with this kind of weather, and keeping everybody safe and to their destination. The police officers and the state troopers and the emergency vehicles that have to get to a car that's stuck or pulled out of a ditch, like AAA or any of those trucks and vehicles that answer the call. If I left out anybody, I make a blanket statement to all those people, to the men and women who plow the roads and the sidewalks. It's a tough job. There's barely any place to walk. You have to end up in the street because the sidewalks are just so highly piled up with snow. So I thank them, and I hope that they're staying safe and not overdoing themselves so that they can end up, aching and paining for the next couple of weeks. I read a segment of Sylvia Brown's book about secret societies, and it's very telling because it goes back to the late 1800s, and there were 3 categories of the many categories that she touched on in her research. And by the way, she's never been sued once for any of the books that she's ever published. And it shows the secret societies that most pertain to education, government, and the good and the bad, the Illuminati, things that we see in the movies that appear to be fictional but are really not. That somehow, since biblical times, these men and women, mostly men, because not until the late mid 1970s or 80s were women allowed to join secret societies. And last week I spoke about the fact that if a college student or a high school student that's getting ready to graduate and go to a particular college, they may be approached because of their speciality or their talent or their attitude, which is very arrogant, and it's proven by the hazing that they impose on other pledges and college student wannabes. And they try to ferret out the competition by literally destroying some of the lives of students at the college level, especially at the beginning of college life, by forcing them to drink excessive amounts of liquor and drugs and hazing situations where they're unclothed except for their underwear and put in a freezing temperature. To me, that smacks of brutality on a grand scale, of putting at risk the life of a male student because he or she has been programmed to believe that once you get into a sorority or fraternity, life is you're in. But I'm wondering if the asking price is worth the paying price of belonging to a group of mindsets that has the annihilation or the perceived annihilation of freedom for everyone on this planet. Because it's not just here, it's overseas in many countries. And in many countries, women are still not allowed certain political or positions of responsibility. It's really very difficult for me to read some of the material that is put on television and in the internet and in the newspapers and magazines, where there are really people that were born on American soil but came from the mindsets of their prior generations, that somehow human beings were made to be enslaved by them, that they and only they have a right to the best that this planet can provide, that businesses can violate the rights of the Constitution, the constitutional processes of everyday expected compliance, and they've been getting away with it because of these secret societies that have a very, very long history. And there's a list of some of the more currently known members of these secret societies, and one of them is Dick Cheney. And to me, Dick Cheney appears to be the epitome of a man who is so driven to enslave and to abuse the rights of anyone and everybody that gets in the way of his agenda and the agenda of those that he serves by the processes that he uses to subjugate anyone that gets in the way, to violate, to torture. Eisenhower was one. Senator Kerry is another. But they're different kind of people. It's the humanity that's either lacking or is evident in these powerful title political entities. President Clinton, Condoleezza Rice. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing her name right, but something about her has never registered right with me. And it could be because she appears to have that mindset of callous disregard for the rightful way to do things. That because they're connected at the mind and the hip and the pocketbook or the wallet, that somehow that is the measuring stick by which all of these negative and unconstitutional processes are processed and allowed. I was doing a little research on Puerto Rico because I wanted to talk about Puerto Rico and Cuba. And earlier today, Cuba, in its early history, was very much like the native indigenous to the northern continent that would become the Northern American continent, and all of the native peoples of this continent. They were Taino. And Taino, I was surprised that there were Taino Indians in Cuba. But Taino Indians, which came from the Arawakan tribe, was sort of like an appendage, for lack of another way to put it, of the native Arawakan of those islands, the Caribbean islands, and what would become Cuba. And Cuba was originally named by Christopher Columbus when he discovered it, when it wasn't lost, but he discovered it. It was called Juana, which is the Spanish name for John, or the equivalent feminine name of John, because Juana with an A depicts in Spanish a woman's name. And it was changed to Cuba. And it would appear that like what he took over in Puerto Rico when it was not called Puerto Rico. And again, the same history applies to both early Cuban history and or prior to Columbus's discovering it. There were equal human tribes of native peoples on those lands, and he managed to almost annihilate in total the native peoples, the Arawakan and Taino, plus two others that I can't remember right now. Literally wiped them off the planet. So this history that we were taught at school is nothing like the real history of how this world became populated by explorers and the people of conquest from other countries that literally appeared to consider any human being that was in their way, that had been there for thousands of years, it was okay to annihilate them. And this is pre-Hitler and pre-Gestapoism. But it is very similar in the sense of the atrocities that lend themselves to all of these annihilations of human tribes for the sake of other human tribes from another part of the planet to come in and take over. Because they found riches and gold and this and that they didn't have or were new to them from their part of the world to the new part of the world. So human history has a very, very long, not always disclosed or undisclosed, disclosed and undisclosed for millennia. And you just wonder how the men that signed the Declaration of Independence even got away with it, considering the multitudinous mindsets that came to this planet from 1492 forward, or this part of the country on the planet, and annihilated so many human lives, and just stole and were barbaric and wasteful and abusive. And then they had the nerve to carry the banner of a crucifix on a material that were on their banners floating in the air. How do you reconcile that kind of barbarity with Christianity? How do you reconcile that? How do you make it right? It's one thing to fight in self-defense. It's another one to go in and annihilate men, women, and children. A Wounded Knee in American history, they just ran over those people. And there was another battle, and I can't remember the name of it, where an American general of the 1800s, between the 18 and 1900s, went into a native village that was only populated with elderly male Indians, women, and children, and they killed them all. They were totally defenseless, and I believe it was General Sherman. They weren't posing a threat. In fact, the one young male that was there was wearing gold medallions that had been presented to him by the president of the time. He had been to Washington, and they were supposed to be at peace. But the personal hates and prejudices that seem to dominate so many human beings from so many different human tribes, it's astonishing what they've gotten away with. So people like me that fight against it, and people like Glenn Ouellette, who is running for mayor, and a lot of people don't give him a chance in hell. But even if he doesn't make it, he's made a point. He has proven to the some people within the community that really need to know the real information about what really goes on behind closed doors at City Hall and at Concord, that we the people of this community, this city in Manchester, are not always treated equally and constitutionally for personal prejudices and perceived alliances with all of these people behind the scenes that we never get to see or hear what they say, what they do, and why they're doing it. I can't even begin to, you know, it's really hard to reconcile the contradictions because we're taught as children, oh, you must obey. You must obey, you must obey, you must obey. But right in front of them are all these contradictions and all of these abuses that are imposed on a child. I've spoken about this many times, and I will continue to speak about it. When a teacher, whether it's clergy or not, whether it's a layperson, that will humiliate a child in front of his peer group instead of speaking to he or she after class or asking them to stay, that they want to speak to them in the privacy of a closed classroom, behind the closed classroom door, where the child and the teacher can speak one-on-one. And she or he can tell that child why they feel the way they feel about their conduct, and find out what's going on. There are a lot of kids that come to school that come from abusive homes or come from circumstances where they haven't had breakfast. Carol Williams told me a few years ago when she used to volunteer for a school here in Manchester that there were some children in the winter months going to school with no coat on, no gloves, no boots. So what do you think is in the mind of a child that's in kindergarten or first grade and sees other children with boots and gloves and coats and food to eat? If cruelty was money, our country would be the richest country in the world. Because there are so many people within each community that appear to see the human inhabitants of some of the human inhabitants of their community as merchandise to be traded, to be bartered, to be used to attain something or to do a favor for somebody. Property owners in particular, rental property owners, especially those that are subsidized by federal tax dollars. I don't know how it is that this city has allowed for decades, and this is a worldwide phenomenon. This is not exclusive to Manchester, New Hampshire, but this is where I live, and this is where I've experienced it and seen it firsthand. So it's the only place that I can actually speak to it because I've lived it, I've witnessed it, and I've seen and experienced the mindset of some of the people that are supposed to provide compliance and enforcement of housing codes that remain violated to the point where properties become condemned, not by the city, but by the fire department. When they go to check something out and find that the building is just so corrupted, so decayed, so out of code compliance that it's not safe for human habitation, much less having their firefighters go into these dilapidated, rundown buildings to risk their lives. And still people, oh, that's the mayor, oh, that's congressperson this or senator that, and they're not doing anything. They're not doing anything to enforce the already existing laws that have been in effect since 1776, including housing, which is local at every level, but it's constitutional. And that's the difference. It's constitutional. That is sort of like the saving grace. It's like the prayer that you speak to God about. The Constitution is almost like, you could say, the Holy Grail, because it encompasses the rights of human beings, period. It's not supposed to be segregated. It's not supposed to be sexist. It's not supposed to be abused. And yet it is. The letdown that can happen, has happened, and will continue to happen when you're raising a child and he or she is in a very bad environment emotionally, and they fall by the wayside, they disappear, or they start doing drugs, or they start hanging out with people that are in the same boat as them, and they become abusive yet again. And if you're a nice kid, or if you're a decent kid, or if you're a respectful kid, then you're made fun of. So how does a kid fight all of that logically, unscathed by the outcome of some of the things that they've been subjected to in schools and at home, or just playing on the street? The territoriality mentality that some people have when they live in a neighborhood. And they don't even own the property. You have to have certain permission to walk in a certain part of town without taking your life, putting your life at risk. If anybody saw any version of Rita Moreno was in it, and it was a Broadway play, and then it was made into a movie, and I can't think of it right now. But the point was that it was about territoriality between the Puerto Ricans and every other kind, Italian, Irish, whatever. And they fought each other for property that they didn't even own or could ever own. And in the end, another murder takes place. And eventually, for the moment at least, at the end of the movie, they all gathered together, both sides, to pick up the body of the man that was killed in a knife fight. West Side Story. And West Side Story has been repeated over and over and over again historically throughout human time. It's one thing to protect your property if you have property that you own and that you have the right to protect. It's another one when you're walking down the street and somebody decides that you don't belong there even though you live there. And in order for you to be able to continue to live there, you have to pay a price of some kind. Same thing with school. Kids that go to school. You know, if you're not in a certain group, then you can be bullied. You can have your lunch taken, your lunch money taken. You can be beaten up. So from that education, how do you expect a child, male or female, to understand the complexities of humanity, of the contradictions that are part of their everyday exposure, of putting down somebody in front of parents or adults, putting down a race or a sex or whatever of another student or a kid down the block, simply because of their prejudices, which they now want to initiate onto the next generation. And what happens if the next generation doesn't want any part of it? You know, the name of human communities comes from the place where they originated from. America, most people that were either born in America or became American are known as American. But America has 52 states. Like I've mentioned before, President Obama was born in Hawaii. But he's not called a Hawaiian black man. He's just called a black man. No matter what his original tribe affiliation was in his human history or genealogy, he's an American. But they don't say American-born President Obama or Hawaiian-born President Obama. The black man, President Obama. As if somehow the tint of a person's skin is a measuring stick by which their brains and their heart and their soul and their lungs and everything operates. Because when you take the skin coloring out of the equation, everybody's the same internally. They all have the same color internally. Their blood is red, their veins are blue. Their lungs are different types of, the human organs are different colorings that have nothing to do with bronze or black or brown or yellow. So why does it still exist at the level that it does? And the answer is the hate. There's a hate level in our country that is a contradiction. Because in this country, we're supposed to be free of that. And that is not the case. That is not the case. It's one of the biggest contradictions of humankind across the planet. If you go to a country that, let's say it's Spain or Greece, there's still racism within their own people because you're not a certain type of Hispanic or a certain type of Greek or a certain type of Italian. How did that manifest to such a high level of accepted normal acceptability? If you're not blonde, if you're a brunette, if you're a redhead, if you're an albino, you're still a human being. In the animal kingdom, you have, let's say for the sake of reference, dogs. You have every kind of dog that you can think of, corgis and German shepherds and Labrador retrievers and corgi. Did I say corgi already? Trying to think of Great Danes, schnauzers. There's so many types of dogs. Now, do you see any of these dogs fighting with each other because when they sniff each other, this is not a German Shepherd, so I'm going to bite him or her. Normally, that's not the case. Every once in a while, of course, there's disagreements among dogs in the animal kingdom. But most in the animal kingdom, including the tiger, the lion, the gorilla, they don't kill just for the sake of killing. They only kill to eat. So why is it that humankind has so seriously defaulted on the message that we are all God's children? That God created every human being that has ever existed on this planet, and those that have gone into history as annihilated. But there was so much interracial coupling by those that came to stoop and conquer and brought with them other slaves from Africa and the Caribbean, that the races really became very, very mixed. And so that in certain communities of races, it's not a specific one race. I was reading some reports about different colleges and people that investigate prior history of humanities, and they say that because of prior enslavements that then went forward into history as becoming part of other communities that became enslaved, there was an intermingling, so that for the sake of of seeing if there was any survivors of the original people who were almost annihilated. And they came across the DNA of interracial couplings that have taken place over the last couple of 100 years. And that a lot of the Caribbean and Spanish islands that became Spanish because the conquerors were Spanish, but were not Spanish prior to the conquering, they mixed with those inhabitants before they annihilated almost all of them. So the history that we learn at school is certainly not the history that really existed and exists and is continuously rewritten to bring it up to date because of the internet and the majority of the seekers of truth that are in the business of doing just that, of seeking out what was not totally disclosed during their time frame as a student, or their family's time frame when their prior generations were students, and the prejudices that became a part of an unwanted inheritance for some within those communities of families. You know, in my family, there were so many different marriages that we could be a little bit of legal League of Nations of our own. Swedish, German, Greek, Filipino, Welsh and Irish, Italian for sure. Those are the ones that come to mind right away. And yet within those marriages that came from the members of my particular family, there were prejudices. There were prejudices because we were Puerto Rican. But yet they married a Puerto Rican. But they were Italian, so somehow that made them better than his family. So see, I don't understand that. If a person is a real jerk, it's not exclusive to any one race or gender preference. It's a human issue. And as human beings, I've said this 1,000 times, it's the best and the worst of itself. If you're born into a family that doesn't believe in equality, what do? Are you supposed to obey a parent or an older person or a grandparent who has a very negative, unconstitutional mindset? Are you supposed to adopt that in order to survive in the family? How does a kid get out of that? How does a kid get out of that? How does a kid who's used as an unpaid slave for some of the women of her family because they want a weekend off, so they come and pick you up from your parents' house and take you to their house so that you can clean, you can babysit, you can change diapers, because at the time that was the case, there were no Pampers. And you're only 7, 8, or 10 years old. And then if you don't do it right, you get the hell beat out of you. How can parents let other people hit their children? I don't care if it's a family member or not, especially at school, where a teacher or a nun or a priest or a rabbi or whatever, a cleric, will strike your child. How do you let them get away with that? And why would you? If a child is acting out, wait till the class is over and send them to the principal's office and then call the parents. But to strike a child in the classroom especially with a weapon. You know, when you think about it, when when a student is hazed, whether it's male or female, there's sort of like a kidnapping of their constitutional rights. They are being held hostage by a situation that they can't get themselves out of because they've been taught that in order for them to become a member of this sorority or fraternity or secret society, they have to allow themselves to be humiliated, to be beaten, to be drugged, to be raped. So isn't that a form of kidnapping? When you deny a person their right to choose, and you impose, or they impose, what is considered regarding the pledge, that he or she must humiliate themselves, must allow themselves to be violated in order to join this group. And as I've said many times before, logically speaking, why would anybody want or need to join a group that is so unconstitutional in its mindset and in its actions? That's not being cool. That's not being, oh, gee, this is so and such a fraternity or sorority, so that means I'm in like Flint. Unless, of course, they're willing to pay the price so that they can turn around and then do it to somebody else. That's the alternate mindset that presents itself for consideration. You go into a job, you're a brand new employee, you apply for the job, and out of all those applicants, you are offered the job. And you walk in, and you're introduced to everybody except the one person that will send your life into a living hell because of her personal prejudices. So how do you fix that? Why is it that racism on the job is so easily accepted? Because a long-term employee of any title decides that they don't want to work with the new employee because of her or his mindset, racist-wise, or because maybe they feel threatened by the fact that this person can do the job that they say that they've decided they don't want them to do the job or to have the job or to keep the job. As I've mentioned over and over again, when I was on the job, this employee tried to get me sent to the computer school that the law firm had a contract with because they bought the software. They designed the software for their legal accounting and billing. And it was very, very similar in program to the one I had done at another law firm for 3 years. The only thing was there was a variable in some of the codes that were used to designate a particular process or billing or account billing amount or identification. So how does one remain calm? How does one turn the other cheek when they've lost everything and almost lost their life twice because of a work-related scenario that debilitated their ability to breathe normally, and their immune system was attacked to the point where it caused vulnerability of infection very easily. And what about the person that breaks their leg and it doesn't heal right, or they have a back injury? I don't know how many times I've watched video information or news information where insurance companies will hire people to follow people with a camera in a car or a van to show that their claims of disability are bogus. Now, it's true that there are people who have fooled the system. But when you're disabled to a certain level, but you're still able to move around, are you supposed to just vegetate and not try to use whatever parts of your body are still functional so that you don't degrade or decay into more disability because you're either over-medicated or because, if you do anything, you might lose your disability, the funding of your disability? The situation that I saw, this man was watching a woman get grocery bags out of a car. There were two people, but the woman behind the wheel appeared to be the one that had received disability. She had one bag with, it would appear, one item because the way she was carrying it at the tip of the bag, and the bag was very light, so it might have had bread in it, and maybe that's why it was in the bag by itself so it wouldn't get crushed. But yet the other woman that was with her was helping her remove the groceries from the back of the car. So insurance companies appear to be in the business of denying validly proven work-related claims so that they can pat themselves on the back and give themselves more bonuses every year for denying the rights of a validly injured person and to impose it on the programs of the taxpayer. So the contradictions just don't seem to end. They don't seem to end at all. And the political system and the way, I'm glad I said that. The Democratic Party, the DNC, Debbie Wasserman, I get these emails from her constantly, and they make you feel like a penny asking for change because they put the minimal amount that they would accept as a donation, $3, and then it goes up. And it says in the email, you haven't donated. And I've written repeatedly to the Democratic Party that I am not a Democrat. I am an independent, and that first of all, I don't have money to give. Now, if it was to President Obama or anybody that I believed in, I would donate directly to that person, but not to the Democratic or Republican or any other kind of party. These people get money up the yin-yang from all of these corporations and all of their secret society memberships affiliated throughout the network of operational procedures of the United States of America and even foreign countries because they're in bed together. The Koch brothers come to mind. The original Koch family started out as a humanitarian institution, but the sons came along and perverted the system. And everybody knows it, everybody writes about it, everybody reads it, but why is our government not doing anything about how much they have abused the constitutional processes of these United States? How can any business entity be more important than the constitutional processes of these United States? Why? The only answer that comes to mind is that there's so much blackmail going on because this one knows this one about that, or this one received money that they never paid taxes for, or they were given a favor, or they were given an airplane to use for their personal traveling. Any number of multitudinous gifts given to these people that run our country and our communities. So we're at the mercy of the relentless abuses of those that we don't get to vote for. Those that we don't get to vote for. Some we vote for, but most of the unknowns don't hold political title. They are businessmen and women worldwide. And they pull the purse strings, they're puppeteers. And then we're supposed to respect these people and not complain and not look for the freedom that is supposed to be the right of every single human being on the planet, much less that of the United States of America and its territories. They keep polluting the waters, and the way foods are processed, the seeds that go into the soil. Donald Rumsfeld was one of those members of secret society. I'm trying to remember other names that appear to have a negative, unconstitutional mindset that were part of these secret societies. All of them were not. The ones that I had listed in the book that I was going to read that I forgot because I had my arms full of other stuff. I didn't realize that I hadn't taken it with me. It's staggering. It's staggering. And J. Edgar Hoover got control of the rights of the people that he targeted in such a low down, dirty, underhanded way that he got control of a lot of political entities in his time frame because he didn't want anybody finding out about his personal sex life. And the fact that he used to dress in drag when he was at home. So he used sex as a weapon to blackmail any political entity that may have had an extramarital affair or whatever in that vein. So it's amazing to me how long these people have gotten away with it and why this country that should be the most freely lived country in the world is one of the most shackled by the continuous non-addressed constitutional violations at every level for a lot of citizens. The attitude of some of the people that work in businesses or in companies or in programs that help people who fall on bad times, or a person whose husband took off and left them with no money and a house full of children. The attitude is stark. It's startling to sit in front of somebody who has already appears to have already decided that they're going to give you a hard time, even if you absolutely qualify and your situation is valid and it's been proven valid. They're going to give you a hard time. They're going to make you wait. I've seen it so many times. I lived it in the beginning of becoming a recipient of the so-called humanitarian, Manchester Health and Human Services. This is not a brush to paint everybody that works there, but when it was on Valley Street, I couldn't believe how this woman would look at me like I was nothing, and then handed me off to somebody else because she didn't even want it. That in that time frame, they have the people that take your information according to alphabet, like from A to D and then from E to H and so on and so forth. And I had to be taken out of sequence because I refused to let her continue to abuse me, and I I wrote a letter to the head department, and I told them that I was going to take legal action. She would hold up my monthly coverage for my medication and my prescriptions for up to 2 weeks, because you're supposed to go in the first day or the first week of the business day of the month. At that time, we're talking 25 years ago, and bring in, whatever documentation. Every 30 days you had to do that until you were approved by the state for long-term assistance. And I had to cancel doctor's appointments and my prescriptions because she wouldn't process my paperwork till sometimes the middle of the month. And at that time, I was in what they call a state of depression. I didn't even know it, because it's funny how that happens to a person. Their mindset becomes something else, but you're not even aware of it. They call it a post-traumatic stress disorder, because I couldn't believe what had happened to me and where I ended up, and how I almost died twice, and nobody was protecting the processes. So I believe that in some instances, I believe that I had to experience that so I could then become an advocate for it. So that if I can save one person a year for the last 25 years, I would have done my job. I cannot respect any agency. I don't care if it's a church. I don't care if it's the President of the United States. If they are not protecting us by the constitutional process guaranteed by our Constitution, I cannot respect them. And I will speak against it until my last breath. If you're going to be a racist, or if you're going to be a nonconformist of the Constitution, then don't hold public office. Don't hold political office. Don't hold any office where the Constitution is expected to be processed. I have seen people belittled and made to feel like a penny asking for change when they agree to work for somebody because they're so desperate to earn a living, that they will work underpaid just to be able to bring home something, and then to live in non-housing code compliance, where bed bugs and rotted staircases and indoor air pollution and unsafe everything, including the very soil that their children will play on with radon. All of these things are everyday occurrences that do not appear to have any remedy in sight, even though the remedies do exist. And the cold-bloodedness and the narrow-mindedness and the perceived I don't give a damn attitude of City Hall and the mayor's office is I don't understand how he gets to keep his job. I don't care what political title they hold. If they are violating the constitutional processes of their community at the city, state, and federal level, then they should be held accountable. So why isn't that happening? Why isn't that happening? Cheryl Mitchell was appointed by Mr. Ed Osborne before he died to fill in as ward alderman. And I would encourage people to get in touch with Cheryl Mitchell. She's in the phone book, and she's online. Gobzuk at Comcast.net, Gobzuk at Comcast.net. She has been a community advocate for a very long time, she and her husband John. And she's the one that created the memorial for Officer Michael Briggs when he was killed on her property years ago. And every year she holds a candlelight vigil for Officer Briggs and his family and all police officers that step out into this bleak world of Manchester, New Hampshire, and have to deal with some really dangerous situations. She appears to be a very no holds barred when it comes to doing the right thing. It appears to be part of her psyche. There's only one way to do it, and it's got to be done right, because the Constitution says that we have the right to do that, and she has the right to do that as a potential alderman for her ward and for the city of Manchester as a whole. But I guarantee you that there are people, aldermen on that board and officials at City Hall, don't want an honest person sitting next to them during public session. They have too many irons in the fire that they don't want her to know about. But if you give it some thought, we need her there. We need an honest person besides some of the others that sit at the board. Specifically, Pat Long comes to mind. He's another, fighter. I haven't spoken to him in a while, but he's never disappointed me. And when I needed to talk to him, he took the time to meet me and speak to me, or allow me to be heard what concerns I had. And he's the only one. And as far as Mike Lopez goes, I think he should be banned from the city, much less from City Hall. The appearance of his personal self-interest, a blind person could see it. I wouldn't trust him with yesterday. I have 2 minutes left. I'm sorry that I bungled through this, because, like I said, I worked very hard, and I printed out quite a bit of material that I was going to read to you and read from the book of Secret Societies by Sylvia Brown, to enlighten you about what's been going on for eons, not just decades, but eons of time, millennia of time, regarding the corruption of humanity and the rights of peoples all across the planet, but most especially on this so-called free country of the United States of America and its territories and its citizens. So please remember that freedom isn't free, and so long until next time.